Hello and welcome to the Dr. Squee Show, brought to you this week, as last week and next week, to celebrate the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who. We brought back Gallifrey Stands, my old podcast, and we brought back the theme tune this week. I didn't quite get around to it in time for last week's show. So if you're a bit confused, if you're listening on the radio, don't worry, it's the Dr. Squee Show. We're just talking Doctor Who because I'm a bit nerdy that way. And I couldn't be more happy to get my guest in this week. She is an author behind the Godblind Trilogy, and she's also written for Marvel. Please welcome back to the Dr. Squee Show, Anna Stevens. If I could get my mouse to work. Anna, how are you doing this fine morning?
Hello. Hi, I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. And it looks like we might have got rid of the delay we were just experiencing when we first hooked up online today. So that's a good start.
Brilliant. That's good to know.
And as I was just saying to Anna, full disclosure, she might be a little bit fresher than me today because actually, as this goes out on radio on Tuesday, it is my birthday today. So there might have been some celebrations last night as we're recording this on a Sunday, but we will never mind that now. We're here to talk about Doctor Who, and nothing gets me feeling better than that. So that's all to the good. Anna, we've been talking a bit about the other festivities which have been happening for the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who, which I still can't believe. It feels like yesterday it was the 50th, doesn't it?
I know. Yeah, I was like, when they said it was the 60th anniversary, I was like, but it can't be because we watched the 50th anniversary only about 18 months ago. Yeah. And, it just feels like it can't be another 10 years, surely. What is happening to time?
It's crazy. Well, it's all timey-wimey, eh?
It's all timey-wimey.
Subject matter. There you go. I did want to talk about, we talked last week about the short that they did for Children Need. I thought we'd bring in a little bit of something from the other 60th celebrations each week. So this week I thought we'd talk about Tales of the TARDIS. This was just spectacular for me. It worked very well, very nicely for me, the fact that the first one, because I just decided I was just going to watch them in the order they put them up on the Hooniverse on the iPlayer. And so just experienced it in the order that they put it up, for whatever reason they put it up in that. And the first one was with Peter Davison, who growing up was my doctor. And I particularly remember Tegan as well. And Earthshock, of course, a wonderful episode to pick. And I decided I was going to watch them one a night, like all the way through, not just pick out the bookends, which some people do. I wanted to experience it in the whole. And man, it was just so joyful. It was just so much fun to have those original characters back. I felt like a kid again watching this, and it felt like experiencing it anew. How did you find the Tales of the TARDIS?
Yeah, I mean, we did exactly the same thing. We just watched one a night in the order that they showed up, and it was so nice to have them all back, and to just sort of, it almost felt like or what have they been up to in the last sort of 50 years, 60 years, depending on who it was. And they chose really good episodes, I think, as well. I mean, I know that it had to be dependent on, especially for some of the earlier ones, as who was still alive and able to come on the show, and therefore which episodes they could choose as a result. But there wasn't a weak one, I mean, they did choose, they chose the big stories, the good stories from each of those 6 eras. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought they were great.
I'm really hoping we're going to see more of the memory TARDIS, and we're going to see more of the Tales of the TARDIS. I think it's just a wonderful idea, and also made me a little bit less precious, I guess. Like, usually whenever there's one of these anniversaries, it's always got to be the regeneration episodes I end up watching, and it's always usually ends up the sort of usual suspects, just more because more Doctor Who's been made. And this time I was like, well, yeah, why not just pick out the best episode? Why not just pick out some favorite episodes which I haven't seen in ages, or maybe some which I've seen a bit less? And so I had a really good time just picking out random episodes, and I wasn't going in Doctor order. It was just like, I fancy this today, I fancy a bit Hartnell today, let's go for a bit of Tennant today, let's just really have fun with it. And it kind of felt a bit perfect for me as well, because I recently, well, a few months ago now, I moved, and just moved my recording stuff into here because it was in an office which was needed as a spare bedroom for someone. So I moved everything in here, and it feels like, because I've just distilled down, because I was living in a house before which had my stuff all over it, and I moved to sort of like lodging with a friend of mine, and I'm sort of all in one room, and it feels like the stuff which I put around me, because you have to kind of condense down to just your favorite things out, it feels a bit like a memory TARDIS in here. When I saw that, I was like, that seems weirdly apt for me. Just as this go. I feel like I'm in a bit of my own memory TARDIS here in my bedroom / studio / everything else that it is. And it was just, I just love the fact they'd just gone crazy with it as well, and just stuck bits of TARDIS like they'd had a console on the roof.
Yeah, stuff on the ceiling. Yeah, and like stuff underneath stuff and inside stuff, and like when they were, they're opening drawers and they're like, oh look, I remember this, and yeah, it was great, and it was. I mean, I don't know. Some of those companions have like retired decades ago, but people still come back. It's like if you get, I mean, because I know that Hartnell was a bit famous for when he was first filming it. He was like, well, it's just a kids show and it blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But, I mean, I don't think he had a clue what he was beginning, he didn't.
Yeah.
And I do wonder, what he thought looking back when, he did the 3 Doctors, he did the 5 Doctors as well, did he?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually really weird because something which... No, he wasn't. Sorry, the 5 Doctors was Richard Hurndall.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, in the 3 Doctors, it was actually, someone said this to me. They said it's like, oh, it's just a bit sad in the 3 Doctors that he was getting a bit old. He kind of was basically just reading his lines of the Otter. I was like, no, it's not like that. When I watched it this time, it was the first time I've ever really, oh yeah, he kind of is. And it's like, but it's just so magical to have him back. I think you don't really notice as much. It's have fun with it. And it was kind of like interesting to have that one being led in the 3 Doctors with Joe Grant and the guy Daniel Anthony, is it, from the Sarah Jane Adventures, Clyde?
Yeah.
And anyway, that was kind of interesting to have, like, it was almost like he was being told the story as opposed to like the other ones were them sort of more reminiscing. And I really did like with one, because we mentioned William Hartnell before, I really love the one with Peter Purvis and Maureen O'Brien doing the intro to it, because it's like there was, I think they particularly because of the different style of the acting of the time, it felt like bringing back that sort of style of acting, and kind of when they were saying, let's make that wish to bring back the Doctor, it sort of felt like a sort of magical thing you can do with that era of Doctor Who. If you did it with a later version, it might seem a bit cheesy, but it was so, like, I was like, yeah, let's make that wish, let's make it, yay. Like a kid going along on that ride somehow.
It did have that. It did feel like it was that they still had it in mind that they were acting for children, and it did have that sort of magical element to it where it was like, clap if you believe in fairies. It had that kind of thing about it, didn't it?
And yeah, I sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I'd forgotten that in the 3 Doctors, that classic Hartnell line where he sees his next 2 selves and he just goes, oh, look, it's the dandy and the clown. And I just thought, oh, it was just, I'd completely forgotten that line. And it just, and because then obviously it harked forward, so to speak, to the 50th special, when you've got the War Doctor, and then you've got and because John Hurt, he called Tennant and Smith
Sandshoes.
was it Chinny and Sandshoes?
Chinny and Sandshoes, yeah, that sounds about right.
And it just, and you can sort of see the circularity of it, and that like the modern era, they're trying so hard to hark back to those classic ideas and the classic feelings that were going on. And I love when you get to see that and you're like, oh yeah, see, they are making it because they are all still fans of the classics, and they're trying to keep that sort of love and that homage to it going.
And we're about to get the interesting thing about the Toy Maker being in the next episode is it's the first time outside the big two of the Cybermen and the Daleks that they brought back a Hartnell era bad guy, which is just a wonderful little fact. I love the fact that, yeah, Russell T Davies is definitely this time. It seems like it's going right. We've had all the multiple Doctor things before. I'm sure we're going to get a moment next week where we see at least the sort of floating heads of the other Doctors flashing past the screen at some opportune moments. But I like the fact that he's decided to go for something different. And it's like, instead, let's like evoke some feelings from the different kind of eras of Who. Because like I really felt with this week's episode, and it brings us neatly on, it really felt like they'd nailed the running down the corridor aspect of Doctor Who, which is rather faint.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, God, last night's episode, it was just so good.
And it's so different as well, because like last week, I really appreciated that it was, it felt like it was that thing of like the kinetic action of Doctor Who. Again, it made me feel like a kid watching it because it was just so exciting, so action driven. And this was more of a thoughtful one. I actually had to watch it. I think I appreciated a bit more watching it a second time today because it was such a different tonal shift. And I knew this was one I'd have to sit with a bit longer. Like the other one was instant gratification of just everything's exploding. Right, the Meep's over here, but the Meep's a bad guy, and these things, and and like this was more like them just having it was sort of like a decompression moment because they, Donna even says in the episode that she didn't get a chance to stop and eat some tea last night because they were dealing with the Meep. We haven't had a chance to stop and talk, and this felt like that episode was giving them that. But let's wind it back to the beginning. So let's kick it off with the controversy of this week. I love the fact that Russell T is back, and every week's going to have a different controversy for the Who fandom to probably tear themselves apart over. But like, I like the discussion of it is the interesting part. Anyone who's just going, it's like, oh, it's an Asian guy, so I'm never watching Doctor Who. Go away, quite frankly. But I did want a discussion about this because the one thing I did think it's. I mean, every era of Who has to make their decision of what they're going to do, how they're going to frame things, what they're going to do. Are they going to go for colorblind casting like this, which obviously RTD's gone for? The only thing I did think was interesting is like this is the first time that's been done in Doctor Who, and it's like it's been done so successfully in the likes of Hamilton, for instance, was a wonderful musical colorblind casting. It was interesting to tell that story through that lens. The only thing I do think is that with Doctor Who, where it does go into real life events week in, week out, and it does deal with things like racism and kind of like where someone comes from culturally, what skin color they are. All of this does imprint on where they are in the world, where they are in history and everything.
Yeah,
that's my only thought about it. It's like, it's like would someone who was kind of was an Asian guy back then have been able to be in a position that Isaac Newton was in? A quite, for as far as I know, I'm not the biggest historian on him, but as far as I know, quite a privileged person, all told. He's kind of like a successful scientist. He lived quite well. And I just wonder, it's interesting is the only thing. I don't know. I was kind of curious your thoughts here.
I mean, I thought he was cast brilliantly. He did a brilliant job. I mean, it was, it was a very small role, but it was awesome. I absolutely adore the fact that we now have to say Mavity, and I will be saying Mavity forevermore.
I was waiting for the post-credit where the Doctor just goes out, it's gravity, shuts the door, goes back again.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was waiting for. It's like he's got to nip back and tell him at some point, hasn't he? But I mean, there were people of color in who held high positions in history. I mean, that was, what was that, 1668, did he say? To be honest, I don't. I mean, I don't care. He did a great job,
Yeah,
and I'm happy to believe it.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
if
I mean, certainly,
if that's the only thing that people can complain about, then they lead very small lives, basically.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I want to make it clear it's not a complaint from me. I just thought it was interesting, and it's
No,
like,
no.
yeah, going forward when they tell stories of like, you know, what position people were in, how they were judged based on their skin color, and the ridiculous kind of periods of our history, very dark periods of our history we've had when, you know, and still to this day, obviously, the fact that there's people who are, just swearing they're never going to watch Doctor Who because they made Isaac Newton an Asian guy proves we've still got problems there as well. I just thought that kind of side of it was interesting. Doctor Who's always been kind of like, they've tried to get people who look exactly like the people in the past. It's just an interesting sea change. But yeah, I want to make it clear. It's like, that's the decision they've made going forward. I have no problem with it, but it is a change so I thought it's certainly noteworthy anyway. But yeah, it's definitely a hallmark of the RTD era that he is tackling these difficult subjects. Like, we had stuff about like trans rights last week, and disability is kind of featuring in there as well. It's just an interesting kind of change of note. But and they do have the lovely moment, of course. It's like, it reminded me a lot of the we're not amused moment from the earlier Rose episode. And now we've got you amongst all people. No, don't do it.
But also what I loved was he knew exactly what Donna was going to say. And he told her not to. And then he just went, you know what? In fact, I'm going to join in. And it was just, he instantly took one look at her face and he knew what she was going to say. And it was just there's the effortless chemistry between Tennant and Tate anyway. But just between them as characters, you know, the Doctor and Donna, it is, because I remember when she was first introduced, and I was like, wow, that's a hell of a decision, because you know her as this very brash, bolshy comedian, and I was like, really, Catherine? And then I just fell in love with her, and I just thought, and she was brilliant, and she was exactly the right companion for his Doctor, for what he was going through and had been through. And he didn't need another beautiful, young, competent person. You know, he needed someone who was gonna slap him around the face and tell him to stop being an idiot when he needed it. So you know, the sort of that effortless chemistry is back between them, and I think it's what makes that pairing such a joy to watch, because they clearly adore each other in real life off screen as well. And I just loved it when he was just like, you know what, I'm not going to tell you not to say it, I'm just going to say it with you because it's kind of funny.
And there is I think this is a theme we're getting from this the 14th Doctor compared to the 10th. We are seeing, you know, they talked about it. There's a commentary on iPlayer. I'm sure it's available somewhere in America as well, where Phil Collinson, David Tennant, and the lady who I can't remember, is it writer or director from the episode? Well, someone from the first episode also with them, and they were talking about this, and they were saying it's like when they were talking about the changes between the 10th and the 14th Doctor, they go, it's like, well, like David Tennant was saying, it's like, well, we're just kind of that many, you know, we're 15 years older, so we sort of like knew that would just change it. Like Russell's 15 years older, I'm 15 years older, so it kind of would naturally infuse into character. And I think it's just interesting we're having this moment, where it's like he can be a bit more fun, he can be a bit more kind of irreverent, he can be a bit more flirty. He was saying how hunky Isaac Newton was. And I kind of like that. It's just these little changes, but it's like, and he was open about saying, it's like, oh, I love Donna Noble, she's my best friend, you know. It's like and the 10th Doctor was a bit more chastened with everything, and where they had the whole Rose thing, it's like it was always chaste, not actually ever quite getting there, whereas like I feel like this Doctor would just say it, which is kind of nice. And it was also nice to have this kind of lighter moment at the beginning of the episode where you are going through an episode which is fairly bleak going through it.
Definitely. I mean, when she said Newton, wasn't he hot? And he just went so hot, and then kind of paused and went, is that who I am now? And then and it was when Donna just said, what do you mean now?
Yes.
It's like it's been rising to the surface for some time. And I just thought, oh, you know, but also I really like that because obviously having changed genders and then is regenerating, and you know, Ncuti Gatwa is a member of the LGBT community, so it just feels like they're sort of, I don't know whether that's going to be in any way referenced, but it was nice to just have that sort of real the more openness about it. And I'm like, it's like every year that show gets just a little bit gayer, and I just love it. I think it's brilliant.
Well, I love the fact that it's, I think Russell T was always moving towards this. Maybe just societally, it was just at a stage where there was less pushback from kind of like just really, I mean, I suppose like since the reboot, really, he's just had sexuality just kind of being very open. And the idea that it's like when in the Doctor Dances, I remember there was a line about like, it's like this many years, you think, I haven't danced in that time, as a nice metaphor for sexuality. And it's like, yeah, the dude's like a couple of thousand years old. Probably sex has a very kind of different meaning. Probably like it doesn't have these kind of gender divides that we know of. The Time Lords would be way forward of us on that subject, and this just seems the fruition of that even more so. And like you say, the thought did occur to me that as we're having the first LGBTQ openly so anyway Doctor coming in, it felt like it was laying that groundwork. I think that he's just going to be open to whatever comes his way when it comes to romance when the 15th Doctor comes in. I think that's definitely the direction we're going in. I am starting to worry though, because the TARDIS, very clever bit of software. It's got all this like lovely new console room. It isn't splash proof to a coffee though. I think maybe the Doctor has to look into this.
Yeah, I mean, there's levels of technology that are way beyond anything we can imagine, but it still gets buggered up with a cup of coffee. Yeah, I know. Yeah. I mean, it did really make me laugh, and also it just cracked me up that of course it was Donna who did that. You know, of course it was Donna who had to break the bloody TARDIS, because what else would she do?
And something as mundane as a cup of coffee was kind of just brilliant. It's not like she spilled some sort of like space liquid on it. It's just a coffee on there.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, it is absolutely beautiful though. It is such a cool TARDIS.
And I really think that the complaint which some people had when there was a picture which got leaked and then someone had basically recreated it rather accurately. Now we see it, recreated done a computer model of it and put it online. And one thing that some people were saying was it did look a bit sterile. I was a little worried about this because I know the original TARDIS was white, but had the kind of cream colors to offset it. The way it lights up though with all the different colors, it's like there's your answer to that question. And it just that's so just beautiful when it just the whole TARDIS is like lit up. It's the whole thing feels like it's alive with energy when it takes off.
Yeah. I mean, it is absolutely gorgeous. I am slightly worried, you know, I was during the episode slightly worried about, you know, because even the Doctor said, you know, she's only just rebuilt herself and you've set her on fire kind of thing. So I was kind of worried about what it was going to look like when he got back in at the end. But she has rebuilt herself properly again, fortunately.
Yeah, and they kind of already answered one of my questions with the picture they put up. They have had a picture of Ncuti in the console room, and they have a jukebox behind him. Because I was thinking, it's like, I love all the kind of expanse of it, but it feels like it needs a few more things in there, like, you know, like the coat rack which they had in the original time. I want some stuff to go in there. So yeah, it looks like he's got a jukebox for his version of it, which is rather nice.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I mean, it is, because it is like twice the size of, or 3 times the size of any console room we've seen before. And yeah, it is also currently completely empty. So yeah, I think that, you know, I definitely think there'll be some little bits and bobs that, you know, even just like when David Tennant took his coat off and hung it over on the rail, and I was like, yeah, that kind of, you just need little bits and bobs here and there. So yeah, that would be good with a jukebox.
Yeah, because I mean, so, like you say, just gorgeous set. But yeah, and of course the Doctor goes straight to work fixing it with the Sonic, which he plugs into it. I thought that was fun. And they brought back, I'm going to forget the name of it, but the system which relocates the TARDIS to keep it safe. It's like HADS. And that's been featured in, I know it was in David Tennant. I'm not sure if it was in the original. I've got a feeling it might have been referenced even back in the original classic era of Doctor Who. But something they've used in Big Finish as well. So again, it's that thing of like just picking out little bits of Doctor Who history which they're sticking in this. Like there seems to be a lot of those reference points in these specials, which is a lovely way of celebrating the kind of 60 years.
Yeah.
And then we lose the TARDIS. And no TARDIS, no Sonic, you know. I always feel very kind of a mixed feeling when they do this in an episode, because it is nice to put the Doctor at odds with himself. Like, he hasn't got his usual gadgets he falls back on, but it's like, I want the TARDIS, I want the Sonic, you know. So it's always a split feeling I get.
Yeah, definitely. It's like you know he's the cleverest person in the room, and you know it's going to be fine. But yeah, you do sort of have your heart in your throat a little bit, because, well, what if this time it isn't? You know, I mean, I know the specials are a celebration, but I could see, especially in last night's episode, like a very unfortunate ending. Not for him, obviously he's the Doctor, but you know, I did sort of fear for Donna at one point. So yeah, him not having his toys around is always a little bit worrying.
And I think they did something. Sorry, go.
No, carry on.
I was just going to say, and I think they did something from the pictures which they released. I think they were quite clever with how they released some of the pictures of the space station we find ourselves on, because there's a bit which when he comes out and he sees it, that to me looked like a console, kind of like from the center of a TARDIS. And a lot of people were thinking that this was maybe set like the TARDIS had landed in another TARDIS. Totally tricked me. I thought that, and it's like, and it's just really incredible, because this usually would have been basically a budget saver out of the three. You've got two very, like, it looks like next week's is going to be absolutely massive again, as the first week's was. This is them basically walking down corridors, which would usually be a budget saver episode. Whereas, like, now you've got Disney money behind it. Even that, it's like, oh, well, you're just going to be running down this corridor, which is this absolutely massive, partly computer generated, partly really their huge set. And it's like, okay, so even when we're small, we're being big now on Doctor Who.
Yeah. I mean, it did, and I found as well, despite the size of the set, the size of the ship that they were on, because of what was happening, it felt very claustrophobic to me, and because I didn't know whether it was the real Doctor and Donna that I was looking at, or whether it was these creatures. And I also loved the way we never saw their original form. We only saw them when they had already taken on the Doctor's and Donna's appearances. And it just made it extra creepy, because you're like, well, what? And so, like, when they were walking along the corridor and the point of view was through the gap in the wall, and it was them watching the Doctor and Donna, and you're just like, but who's watching? What do they look like? And you never find out. And I really enjoyed that, because it was like nothing they could have looked like in their original form would have been as creepy as them being mirrors of the actual Doctor and Donna. I think that actually made it scarier.
It kind of harkens back to something they did with the first time they featured the Daleks. They purposely had it so that to begin with, you were seeing through the eye stalk, because they were, I think, aware that even though the Daleks are obviously a classic design which has endured 60 years now, still, if you film it head on, I think it makes it less scary. Whereas they were like angling things and getting to go through the say the eye stalk. And this harkens back to that idea. It's like, is anything that you could show us going to be as scary as the suggestion of this kind of like omnipresent thing, which is kind of stalking us through the episode.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
very, very RTD to have it being he likes his, like, it's the biggest, it's the furthest we've ever been, it's that, and yeah, it's like it's the furthest the Doctor's ever been out, whereas before it's like it very much reminded me of like, oh, I've never been this far to the end of time before, like in the when I brought the Master back with Yana. And yeah, I just thought that was yeah, you can tell the sort of touchstones of a Russell T Davies Doctor Who.
Yeah, very much. Very much.
And we've also got the fact that, yeah, so the Doctor and Donna find the logs, and they start, the Doctor learns the 10, like to count to 10, because he can work out all the code from that. That was a kind of nice little bit of business. And I did like the fact that the one thing, which I think was meant to be more of a kind of like reveal later that I felt it was maybe the whole thing of like, well, a door lock opened and closed. It's like, yeah, that'll be someone chucking themselves out the airlock to escape whatever this is. I felt like that wasn't as much of a reveal as maybe it was plotted out to be.
Yeah, I mean, because they were sort of assuming that was when the creatures came into the ship, weren't they?
Yeah.
But obviously that was when the captain chucked herself out. Yeah, I mean, the my sort of one tiny little complaint about the episode was the sheer size of that ship, and there was apparently only one living creature on it, and that was the captain. Where was everyone else? I mean, that's like, what was the captain doing at the edge of the universe in a ship that big, all on her own? So I just feel like, you know, if they'd have just said, so an airlock opened and closed 3 years ago, you know, a month before that there was a mass exodus, like 5,000 people fled the ship, kind of thing, then they could have sort of dealt with that. But I mean, you know, that's like just such a tiny minor point for me. It was just that I was sort of expecting to see skeletons or, you know, something to indicate that the ship was dead at the edge of the universe, and there wasn't anything.
I think it is going to all tie. I think it's all going to tie back next week. We're going to find out a bit, like maybe some more information will come to light from this. But yeah, I was wondering, it's like, well, why is this thing at the edge of the universe? And it's like, the Doctor says, like, oh, we're the first ones to get here, apart from the captain and probably the people who construct the ship. And, you know, it's like, it's just, there were a few mystery boxes there, which I don't feel like were fully explored. But having said that, something which I said about last week's episode, which I think is definitely present here, is like, Ross D. Davies definitely just wants to get straight into the action with this. Like we don't bother about you know, when he regenerated, the clothes regenerating stuff. So like that did have the effect of him being just ready to go as the Doctor. He had his Sonic already, so we didn't go through that being created. I did miss those kind of touchstones a little bit myself, but I definitely see why you do it, because we just got an hour of action. We didn't stop to do any of those things. They were just there. So like I respect the decision, even though I missed them a little bit as a geek who just likes the scene where the Doctor picks out his outfit and he gets his Sonic, and you know, but I completely see why you're doing it. Yeah, and I think that's the sort of same thing. It's like you could spend some time, give us some more information, which again we might get next week, but as a result, you don't. You're straight into the action, and you're into the kind of like the weird and wonderful of the episode. One thing which I just think is a hell of a challenge, which they've done really well here, and maybe as a writer you can sort of speak to this a bit, is to have a sort of like, this is basically a capsule episode. It's got really, okay, there's a few different like rooms in the ship, but you're just on one location for the whole thing. Like, have you ever had to write anything like that, where you have just one set and you've just got to get the dialogue just carrying everything? And how do you sort of manage a kind of like structure like that?
I suppose the closest I've ever come is my second book, Dark Soul. Like 90% of the book is set within a city under siege. So it's just the story of the siege. But I did have multiple points of view rather than just two. Or, well, theoretically, this was 4, wasn't it? So when you've got a lot more speaking parts, you've got a lot more characters doing a lot of work, I think it is easier. But I think it just, you know, Russell T Davies was just like, he trusted Tennant and Tate to be able to carry an entire episode where they're talking to each other and effectively themselves for, you know, for an hour. And I think it's a sign, you know, I believe it's a sign of a good writer and a good director to trust the actors to carry something like that. And they absolutely, you know, they absolutely nailed it, whether they were running down the corridor, whether she's smacking a giant hand on the back of the little buggy thing, or whether they were just standing and looking at each other and talking. It just felt, you know, it just felt effortless, and it felt like he was giving them the space and the time to perform those roles without having to throw explosions at them or, you know, anything else to sort of add to the drama. He was just like, no, I trust these guys that they can just stand and deliver those lines, and it will be compelling enough without anything else going on. I mean, yeah, you know, you had the big arms and the double knees and the jaw thing and the spider walk. Oh my God. I was not expecting a scene from The Exorcist in Doctor Who, but yeah, it kind of blew my brains off. But yeah, I do. I think that he just trusted them to, you know, to deliver the lines, and they absolutely rose to the challenge.
Yeah. And I think that has to also come along with a bit of trust for the audience as well. You've got to trust the audience they're going to stick with just a duet becoming four people, but with two actors, that we're going to kind of carry along with the that we have got these two bigger, shall we say, more kind of kinetic episodes either side, and this is going to be a bit more of a kind of like a moody one, a bit more of a kind of like think piece, a bit more of a kind of darker episode. So yeah, I appreciate that as an audience member, that they gave us something just really different to the other two that bookending it. And you do get these wonderful moments like when they split them up, and like, you know, it did take me a second. I like this when I just for a second I get a bit lost on what's happening in a good way. So when they split them up, and then you do have the fake Donna and the fake Doctor coming in, and for a while you know, I certainly didn't know what was going on. It's like, what have I skipped? Are they skipping back and forward in time? What's happening here? And only for a second, but it was just a nice feeling of surprise.
Yeah, definitely. And then and the way they were sort of building the oddness, so the things they were saying, because they were both saying, my arms are too long. And like, so the fake Donna said it, the fake Doctor said it. And I was like, the first time that happened, I was like, what do you mean? What does that mean? And then we flicked to the other one, and then they say it as well. And I was like, what is going on? And then we sort of looked, and then, you know, they panned out and there's these massive arms, and I was like, oh my God.
And again, it sort of reminded me a bit of this case in Everything Everywhere All at Once, where they've got the googly eyes, and they've got the kind of people who've you know, they just have these kind of ridiculous elements which, but out of context, seem creepy and a bit weird and a bit like, yeah, when they've got the arm which flops down, it's a rubber arm flopping on the floor, which kind of made me laugh, but also like, oh, that's weird at the same time. Like, I was feeling so many different emotions when you see this kind of, I like it when they do something a bit absurdist, but it doesn't break the feel of the episode at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, it is when we're talking about it now, objectively absurd, but at the time it was creepy as hell. Yes. And it didn't, and because you've got this kind of dissonance, because, you know, at this point you've kind of figured out that there are fakes, but you don't know which one is which, and you don't know which is the fake talking to which is of the real characters. And it's not really until they say things like, my arms are too long, and then and because then I was like, that's not necessarily indicative of that person being a fake, because there could be so many explanations for why you would come out with such an absurd sentence. It's Doctor Who. I mean, is famous for absurd sentences at times.
Hey, and the Doctor's just regenerated. He could be noticing it's like, oh, they're a bit long.
Exactly. Yeah. There's there are so many possibilities. So yeah, it is objectively absurd. But then when it actually happens, because you're already a bit like, something weird is going on, and we know that something has been watching them, and now these people who look like them have turned up, then it didn't kind of, there was no sort of breaking of the immersion for me when the arms went big, or when the jaw dropped and stuff. I was genuinely like, oh, that is really creepy. I'm not liking this.
The only thing again, like, this is probably my like only small gripe, and it's in the Eye of the Beholder, I think, to a degree, but it was when they were kind of like absolutely massive and sort of jammed in together. I was like, oh, that didn't feel as atmospheric to me anyway, just my personal opinion. But the rest of it, everything else about the weirdness, and yeah, it's like, oh, how many knees do they have? 2? Is that per leg? Yeah, and she's walking in that kind of like grotesque way. That was great.
Yeah, and I think when the Doctor sort of half transformed so that he could run on all fours, that was creepy.
Yeah.
But so when he could run faster because he was running on all, oh, that, like, seriously, there was just like an instant, a tiny little shot where like his hand kind of went really bizarre, like almost into a paw, and then he kind of went down on, and I was like, oh, ooh, okay, that was not good.
It felt like they crossed
brilliant but freaky.
Felt like they crossed one of the apes from the New Planet of the Apes movies with the, I don't know if you remember Return to Oz. I love that, like, kind of creepy take on it. And they had the wheel kind of guys. They had wheels on their hands.
Yeah.
And they had that kind of like, so they had absolutely massive long arms. In my head, it was those two things just somehow merged together in a nightmare scenario.
Yeah. It was very well done, but yeah, the spider walk was just, I was not expecting that really. And I think for people who know the fact that was first done in The Exorcist and have seen it, and that was one of the scenes that was cut because it was considered too frightening to be released by the BFI. So to see it in a Doctor Who show was just like, oh, okay. It really took me by surprise, that did, and it gave me that same sort of instant freak, like jump scare kind of thing because of the associations with The Exorcist. So yeah, and also, I mean, David Tennant's very bendy. I know it wasn't really him, but
yeah, it's. Again, like, it was an interesting moment. I don't think I dislike this. It was just weird when he was like basically talking out of his mum.
Yeah,
it's all I could think of then. It's literally talking out of his bum. And I did also like the reference to Flux. That was interesting because there's been, since it's been announced that Russell T would be coming back and Chibnall was leaving, some people were disgruntled with that era. I don't want to touch upon it too much, I must admit. Just for me personally, it wasn't my favorite kind of era of the show, but it's like, I had a feeling when people go, it's like, oh, they're just going to drop that, they're going to retcon it. It's like, no, I don't think Russell T Davies doesn't usually do that. He always said when it first came back, when he was asked about the Doctor being half human from the 1916 movie, he goes, yeah, everything's happened, like, it's the same Doctor, it's always the same Doctor, every experience they've had, it's always got to be the same Doctor. And so yeah, I was pretty sure that he was going to do something. It was either going to just play on it and just like not reference it too much, or he was going to just tackle it head on. And I'm really glad he did. It's kind of like, I think he'll do something really interesting with it, because just for me, again, I don't want to tear someone down to build someone else up. But it felt a bit unsatisfying to me at the end, where the Doctor, after they've just gone on this wonderful adventure to find like their memories, it's like, now just put it away in the TARDIS. And it's like, okay, so we went on all this to hide it at the end. It's all right, I'd kind of like it if Russell did something with it. And it feels like he's done a version of what he did with the Time War with this. He's made it a mysterious hook, which he can hang so much drama on. And, I think he might tease out the drama quite a bit, which would be kind of interesting to do.
Yeah, I mean, I do miss the like some of the kind of series spanning stories that we had in the modern era when it first came back, you know, like Bad Wolf and The Silence in particular are two of my absolute favorites. And because they just lasted for such a long time. And there were all these different adventures happening, but then every so often you just hark back to it again, or something would slip in again that referenced it. And then you realize that it is like an entire season spanning narrative. So yeah, I did admit that it felt like we lost some of those, and every adventure just became like a single episode. So yeah, it would be I would like it if they sort of bring back a narrative that lasts, you know, quite a long time. I mean, it's like when if you go onto iPlayer and you go through all of the old classics, it's always, you know, episode 1 of a story, you know, and there's either 4 or 6 episodes that make up each little mini arc within the season. And, you know, come on, it worked for 40 years back then. I'm sure we can do it now.
And I think you're totally right. And it's I think this is going to lead into why he chose to go back to that phase as well. It's like maybe that was a phase from a more innocent time before everything happened with the Flux and before he found out this, and he remembered having fun with Donna. And I think that's my feeling at this stage of what they're going to call back to with this. There was just something in the dialogue which just lent me towards that. Now they brought up the Flux side of it, because that is a massive trauma. And yeah, Russell T Davies really is great when he's got something kind of meaty and human drama, even though obviously the Doctor's at least only half human, depending on your viewpoint. But it's like he likes the Doctor to be going through some trauma, I think. And this is, again, you know, you're finding out your whole life's been a lie and everything. It has to be the ground for some wonderful kind of some trauma which the Doctor's going through.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I mean, not only everything that was done to the Doctor as a child, and the you know, all the experiments, and this is how the Time Lords have even learned, have even got the genetics now to be able to regenerate. But you know, so who was the Doctor? What species is the Doctor? You know, where did he, she, they come from? Are there any more of them out there? You know, I mean, he kind of considers himself to be Gallifreyan. I mean, I felt like that was something he was unsure of himself in last night's episode. You know, he was a bit, you know, like, well, am I from Gallifrey? Am I not? You know, am I a Time Lord? Am I not? You know, and part of me wonders, would they do anything so bold as to have him meet people of his actual species and his actual planet? Or does that just take it too far away from the whole nature of the Doctor Who and the whole established history and canon of Gallifrey?
And I think we probably won't certainly not in the RTD era, just from what I've seen from him before in Doctor Who and then other thing. I think he likes keeping the mystery open. He likes kind of teasing you out with details, and he might toss out a line about like, when he was talking about the time where he's like, I was there at the fall of Arcadia, and it wasn't until Moffat came in and then he geniusly took all these elements, all these breadcrumbs that Russell T had laid down and wove them together into what we saw in Day of the Doctor. But I think, Russell T likes the idea of the mystery of it and bringing back, like, you know, like they tried to do during Sylvester McCoy era. You know, there's been certain times where they feel like the mystery has maybe gone out of it, and that was what the Time War was. It was to create another mystery, another thing that we don't know. Well, oh god, like we're wrong-footed from like knowing everything about the Doctor at this stage to not again. I think there's a great excitement about the way he does that. Getting back to the our stretchy friends who are mimicking the Doctor and Donna. I did think it was kind of a stroke of genius as well to have them slowly, you know, it's only at the end you realize that they've been slowly becoming them basically over the course of it. You kind of know they're trying to copy them, but the sort of slowness of it is a feature and not a bug. And it's a wonderful way of kind of stringing out the drama. And yeah, when someone is just copying your memory, how do you prove you're you? They had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah.
I thought that was just really nice.
That was excellent. But what I loved, I mean, you saying about they were becoming them, there was that moment where they had the door between them, and they were just standing talking to their counterparts, and the doctor said, "You've got to stop thinking, just slow down, slow everything down." And then his double, because he was becoming him so much, he knew that if he just started asking questions, the doctor can't not think, and he can't not try and work out the puzzle. And I absolutely loved that bit, because it was, I mean, it was creepy again, because he was so into the doctor's head that he knew that was the way to trigger him and get him going again. But he was also genius, and the way the doctor was like, and Donna was like, don't do it, stop thinking, and he was like, oh God, but I really want to think about it. And I loved it, because the character is so curious about everything, that just playing on that is like, what is the doctor's weakness? Is that he wants to know everything, and he can't stop thinking about stuff and working out puzzles. And to see that actually used like as a weapon against him, I thought was absolute genius.
Yeah, I felt kind of oddly seen by this as well. Like as someone who's in process of getting diagnosed with ADHD, that kind of thing of not being able to switch your head off, it was just really nice to have that represented. It's like, because it is something which can be a great strength of always being able to sort of think outside the box, think of different ways of doing things. But it's when you're late in bed at night and you haven't been able to get sleep for the last hour, even though you've got to get up at like 6 o'clock the next day, and you know that, and the more you think about that, the less you can sleep, and it becomes like a nasty loop. And it felt like the doctor was stuck in one of those. I was like, oh, someone knows.
Yes, yeah. But I was really interested by what he said at the end, where he said, I really wish I hadn't done the thing with the salt.
Yes.
And he said, having, introducing a superstition at the edge of the universe, and they just kind of left that dangling. And I've been thinking about that ever since. And I'm like, what is it going to have done? What are the possibilities? If the edge of the universe is some weird place that is almost like magical, then what might happen because he did that?
Well, it made me think of the rules. That made me think of the rules around the toy maker, because like, I've only seen the clips. Obviously we've only got so much of that adventure surviving, but there was the bit at the end where the doctor tricks the toy maker into being trapped in his own game, because they exit the game with him stuck in it. And I wonder if, like, introducing these rules outside the universe gives somehow him the freedom to escape his prison. So I'm wondering if that's going to be what that is.
So maybe, maybe the doctor has inadvertently allowed the toy maker to escape by introducing a superstition at the edge of the universe. So it's going to be, if that is how it turns out, it'll be his fault, won't it?
Exactly. And I think that's really wonderful. And we just got 7 minutes left. Do have to talk about that wonderful last scene. They get everything sorted out. They banish the doctor's overthinking goes all the way around from being a problem to being the solution again, which is just a nice thing to do. And then you get what we've all been waiting for, what we kind of missed last week. There's kind of the rumor mill's been going around about, but we saw Bernard Cribbins in those shots from the read-through for the Wild Blue Yonder. So was he originally meant to be, sorry, from the Star Beast? So was he originally meant to be in it? Was he not? Whatever, we got him this week. And it did feel like there was certainly as an area in last week's episode where if he had been available and they were writing it so that they could cut him if his health wasn't up to it, felt like there was a space they could have fit him in. So I think maybe that is a vestigial tale from like a bit which they did have with him. But yeah, it was just so nice when they got him. And I love the idea from last week that to take that away from Donna actually took something away from Wilfred, because he was the believer. He was the one who was so excited by the Doctor and by space travel. And it was really lovely that they'd had all these family members who were always kind of worried about the Doctor and always like treated him as a foe. Whereas Wilfred was like, yeah, brilliant. We're going to go to space and we get to see the stars. And the Doctor is just fantastic.
Yeah.
And it was nice to have that represented from a family member, like someone who's excited about the Doctor. And you saw where Donna got everything from. So to have him back not only was wonderful to all of us who miss Bernard and are going to miss him, like, you know, next week is going to be his last ever new TV appearance. And that's so bittersweet. But what he represents to Donna as well. If we hadn't have had this little kind of gem of Bernard Cribbins in these episodes, I think it would have been so much the poorer for it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, she was, you know, I mean, her relationship with her mom is just so unhealthy in a lot of ways. And her, you know, her mom's sort of endless judgment and disappointment in her has always been tempered and sort of almost cancelled out by her granddad's unwavering love and support and good humor. And I always think of the scene back from when David Tennant was number 10, and when Wilf says, you know, I would have been proud to call you my son, or something like that, and the Doctor says, because the Doctor says, doesn't he, you know, I would have loved it if you were really my dad, or I can't remember the exact line, but it's something along that, and he's very teary when he says it. So yeah, so to have him come back, you know, because, you know, Donna's got her daughter now, she's got her husband, she's got her family sort of going down that way in the generations, but she's still got her granddad as well. It would have, I mean, I'm so pleased that he was well enough to come in and just do those little cameos. And it was just, you know, I mean, the build up to it as well, because Donna was saying, you know, they might come back to the alley once a year just to sort of pay their respects, but they'd move on with their life. But, you know, not Grandad. He'd be there every day with his thermos waiting for me to come back. So when they do finally land and open the door and there he is, it was just such a perfect little moment. Yeah.
Absolutely lovely. We are just running out of time. Anna, thank you so much for joining me this week to talk about the great, great Wild Yonder. And we're going to be back next week with the last of the specials. We're going to try and arrange it. Please stay tuned to the details coming out. We're going to try and arrange it so it's just after the episode goes out next week, because I thought that'd be exciting for the last one. And to see David Tennant's last adventure for now. I mean, there's rumors that he might be still sticking around in some form, but we'll see what's going to happen with that. And I'm going to be joined by my old co-host. No, not Dottie, who back. Unfortunately, she's not back with us, but Papa Bear Paul G, my friend who was on Newshound back in the day on Gallifrey Stand, is going to be joining me next week to go through that last episode. Please do join us then. But for now, thank you very much, Hannah. I've been Dr. Squee. With me has been Willow, somewhere out of shots. And for this week, live like you've got two hearts and please be kind. I've been Dr. Squee. That was my show.